Today, the Parliament of South Africa will debate the 8th motion of no confidence against President Jacob Zuma. The EFF, together with the DA, IFP, COPE and other opposition parties, are calling on ministers of Parliament to vote Zuma out in the motion of no confidence, while the regional ANC will march in support of the president. Cape Town will be the focal point of protesters today, as thousands will be taking to the streets for multiple marches. Joining us now, we've still got our political analysts, Professor Susan Booysen from the Wits School of Governance and Professor Sipho Seepe. Again, thank you again for staying with us. And I think we've got you all the way until 9 o'clock, so there's lots of discussions going to be underway. This is a big moment for Parliament in South Africa. I mean, this is unprecedented. It's never happened before. You know, this has got to talk to South Africans about where we're at as a country. What are you looking at?
I think we must look at it positively. This is a part of maturing of democracy, and nothing that is done at the moment has not been provided for in the Constitution. The fact that people went to court, it's also one of the mechanisms that we appeal to try to make sense of the differences. So the court, remember, this is the 8th motion of no confidence. The opposition had tried the last 7, and it failed, and they tried to enlist the courts. And the courts did something very clever to say, first of all, in terms of we must respect the Constitution in terms of separation of powers, but they also said that we're throwing it back to you. But they didn't do it without simply saying it's up to you. They provided guidance. And for me, when I read the guidance from Mkhweng in terms of the number of issues that he had raised, there again, as I will put it, the openness and transparency, the issue of people being bought, the issue of decisions made in dark corners. Remember when we had the secrecy bill, people were making a big deal about the whole issue of transparency. Yeah. But also Mkhweng was also saying we must also respect the will of the people, that we cannot start creating undeserved majorities. So he was he says you need to be very careful about this. And also you need to understand that in as much as you don't like this person, there's also a possibility that it may go beyond him because it will lead to a collapse of government. So there were a number of warnings. This is why when the speaker spoke, we understood that. But if one sees it, one must also accept that this has been provided for in our politics. And what is important in terms of the marches, it's very important, and you guys have captured that you will have opposing marches. Yeah. So let's not universalize the anti-Zuma. There are other people who are going to be marching in his favor. Absolutely. And I listened to the radio yesterday. I listened to people in Soweto, young people who were very angry about the decision, most of them are young activists. And I also had business, which that was very excited about the motion. But ultimately, for me, it is the maturing of our democracy, but it's also a test of the ANC. Because effectively, if the ANC was united in saying President Zuma is a liability, they should have and they would have gotten rid of him. But they had failed. So what they are asking, and actually for me, this is where I say there is a lack of courage and political conviction. In the same way that they were able to remove President Mbeki, they did not need the opposition to help them. Indeed. They simply removed him. So what you have here is that there's a contestation within the ANC, hence the enlisting, hence the issue of secrecy. But what I find amazing is really how suddenly courage can be expressed in secrecy, how conscience has to be expressed in secrecy. I don't buy that. Yeah. I think I have more respect for people like Hanekom. I have more respect for Makosi Koza. I have more respect for people who are willing to speak out and say, this is where I stand. Yeah. You know, so at least they are courageous in their position. Indeed. But this celebration of Nicodemus and making decisions in dark corners, it doesn't augur well with me. I believe that people, as Mkhweng said, that if you are going to follow your conscience, it should be that you take a position irrespective of what happens to you. Yeah. That is courageous.
We're going into news now, but Professor Booysen, from your perspective, I mean, everything that's been said here, the secrecy, going against the grain, do your views, where do you take this?
Now, secrecy goes against the grain in an open contest, in an environment where you have got the freedom to express your opinion. Even Baleka Mbete yesterday, through her decision, acknowledged that it is a toxic poisonous environment where people are being threatened. That open contest does not exist. Ideally, we would have liked that. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, too, there's this big tension between the MPs and what they may be wanting. And on the ground, we know through a range of opinion polls, all coming out in consensus against President Zuma. Activists, yes, certainly, they go a different direction. And Women's League, etc., go a different direction. But there is on the graze a groundswell of opinion across class, across race, against Zuma. And in a way, the ANC is fortunate that because there's a localization, concentration of problems association with Zuma, whereas the problems go much wider. And that is what the ANC has to be concerned about today, that opening gap between what the MPs are doing and what they are instructed by the NEC to do and what the feeling on the ground is. I think there is no doubt what the feeling on the ground is, and we probably are seeing that reflected in all the protests and closures on the ground
that are happening
today
around the country at the moment. And that is the other big story that, of course, we are following this morning. Do stay tuned to Morning Live. We will continue to have analysis. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what happens if, in fact, that vote goes against Zuma and he is taken. What will happen thereon? How many people need to vote for the vote to go in the direction that Zuma is then no longer the president of South Africa, and what happens then? So there is so much to discuss. Stay tuned to Morning Live. We've got all the details here. As we mentioned, Palesa, there seems to be big warning